as we've already seen, many old country traditions have survived the passing of time. Maypole dancing and other long-established folk dances have shed their associations with paganism and are now considered a rather quaint, if rather eccentric, part of Old English custom. All good, harmless fun. Other vestiges of our folklore, though, are rather more sinister. In February 1945, the normally peaceful villages of Upper and Lower Quinton were rocked by a particularly gruesome crime. On the morning of the 14th of February 1945, 74-year-old farm labourer Charles Walton set out from his cottage in Lower Quinton to cut a hedge on nearby Meon Hill. When he failed to return, his niece, Edith Walton, with whom he shared the cottage, raised the alarm, and a group of locals set off to search Meon Hill. What they found shocked the quiet village to its core. They discovered the body of Charles Walton lying face up beneath a willow tree on top of Meon Hill. His own pitchfork had been driven through his throat with such force it had nearly severed his head, and a large crucifix had been carved deeply into his chest with the old man's billhook, which had been left stuck into his ribs. Walton's face was contorted with terror, and his blood had soaked into the ground around his body. The police investigation was led by Superintendent Alex Spooner of Warwickshire CID, but such was the level of national interest in the crime, Superintendent Robert Fabian of Scotland Yard, the most famous detective of the day, was called in to assist. Over 4,000 statements were taken, and anyone visiting the area traced, with interviews conducted as far away as Somerset and Yorkshire. Using the most modern techniques available, samples of hair and clothing from the murder scene were analysed, but none produced positive results. All lines of inquiry were exhausted, but the police were no nearer to finding the killer. Meanwhile, Superintendent Spooner, who had lived and worked in the area for most of his life, and who was well versed in the ways of country folk, had begun pursuing some more unorthodox ideas. He showed Fabian a book published in 1906 which described the murder in 1875 of Anne Turner. John Hayward, a simple farmhand, was tried for the crime, and in his defence claimed that he was acting for the good of the community. Anne Turner, he said, was a witch and had cast a spell on the cattle and land of local farmers. He had killed her by pinning her to the ground with a pitchfork and slashing her chest in the shape of a cross. This, the author explained, was the traditional way of killing a witch. In another book about local folklore, Spooner had come across an old superstition of a ghostly black dog on Meon Hill that is said to be a harbinger of death. The author related the tale of a young ploughboy who, in 1885, had encountered a large black dog on 3 successive days. Shortly afterwards, the young man's sister died unexpectedly. The ploughboy's name was Charles Walton. Fabian, a hardened detective, was sceptical, but in the absence of any other leads, decided to look further into the witchcraft theory. He discovered that the ancient Druids believed that in mid-February the life force of the earth was at its lowest ebb, and required a blood sacrifice to ensure a good harvest. As it so happened, the harvest of 1944, the year before Charles Walton's death, had been a poor one. Could it possibly be that he had been sacrificed to enrich the land? Even Fabian couldn't discount the theory, although pursuing it proved rather more difficult than he imagined.